Hi Quilters, July's here and that means it's time to pick out our project of the month. We are halfway through our challenge of one project a month for 2023. Before we pick the number for this month's project, I want to show you that I got the June project done. In June we picked project number 7, and for me that meant some pillowcases that I'd cut out last year and hadn't gotten around to yet. So I had 4 pillowcases to make, and here they are. 1, 2, 3, and 4. And these are all made with army fabric. And I have 2 sons, one who's currently in the army, one who has served and is out. And I wanted to get them some new pillowcases made with this fun fabric I found. I first saw this pillowcase pattern demonstrated at a quilt festival years and years ago when we would go down for market and festival, and it's called the Roll It Up Pillowcase. It's one of my favorite ways to make a pillowcase.
The pattern for the Roll It Up Pillowcase is available online. We will have a link in the description below to find it at the website of allpeoplequilt.com. They have a bunch of different pillowcase patterns available, but my favorite is the Roll It Up pattern. The reason I love this pattern is because on the inside of the pillowcase there are no raw edges at all, 0 raw edges. There is a free downloadable 4-page pattern with excellent photos and instructions. You can print it at home. I store mine in a plastic sleeve and a 3-ring binder so I know where to find it. I started this set with 2 yards of army fabrics, 1 yard each of 2 different fabrics. Cut each yard into 2 pieces, one that measures 10 inches by 41 inches and one that measures 26 inches by 41 inches. When I'm done, I will end up with 2 different but coordinating pillowcases. As I was cutting out these pillowcases, I didn't really pay any attention to the directionality of the prints, but once you've made one pillowcase, you'll know what you need to do if you want to make the directional print on your fabric go a certain way. And you'll understand how to make the band get on the right side, either the left side or the right side, to make the directional fabric work with the band. Place the band fabric right side up on your table. Place the pillow body fabric right side down, matching up the 41-inch edges. You want to make sure the right sides are together. You want to match up the raw edges and pin along that 41-inch side. I found what's easiest for me is I start on both ends, so I'll do a few pins on one end and then I'll do a few pins on the other end, and I'll keep going back and forth and work towards the center, easing the fabric as needed to make it match. Once pinned, you're going to lay it flat, and on the edge that's opposite the pins, you're going to start rolling the fabric up. You will keep rolling until you are about halfway through the band fabric. You want to leave a couple inches at the top. Now you're going to wrap the band around the rolled up pillow body. You're going to pin all 3 raw edges together. So you should have all 3 raw edges at the top. As you pin this together, you're going to be making a tube. I'm going to pin this together the same way I did the other part, where I just start on both ends and work towards the center. I leave those first pins in place and just add more pins. Make sure that the pillowcase body is all enclosed inside the tube and you haven't pinned into it at all. I'm only showing the one pillowcase, but I'm actually working on both pillowcases at the same time. I'll get them done. It takes a little longer to make 2 than to make 1, but I'll have both of them done when I'm finished. Once you're done pinning, you're going to sew the pinned edge with a 1/4 inch to 1/2 inch seam allowance. I normally just do the 1/4 inch seam allowance. I always make sure that I have all 3 of my raw edges here, 1, 2, 3, and then I can sew. Everything's tucked away. And this takes a while to sew through because you have to stop every time you get to a pin to remove it, but it's worth it to have the pins in there because everything stays in place. I do backstitch at the start and the end of the seam. I usually sew an extra seam for extra hold, but if I had a serger, I would probably use it for this seam instead of having to sew it twice. The second seam goes much faster because there are no stops to take out pins. Now that you've sewn it, it's time for the magic to happen. You're going to start pulling out the rolled up fabric out of the tube. So you're pulling the rolled up fabric out of the band fabric. Just keep pulling and adjusting as needed until the tube is right side out. Once you have the pillow body fabric all pulled out of the tube, it's time to press. You will need to pull on the band fabric as needed to make the seam lay flat. You're going to press towards the band fabric, and I usually press from both sides. I'll press from one side first, then I'll flip the whole thing over just to make sure I haven't put any creases in the seam. I'm going to be showing you the French seam method, but if I had a serger, I would probably just put right sides together, serge the side seam, and then serge the bottom seam and be done, but I don't. So let's get to the French seams. So the first thing you need to do is line up the raw edges with the wrong sides together. I know it looks wrong and it feels wrong, but you need to have the wrong sides together. I will usually pin the band seam so that it won't shift as I'm sewing, and then you want to sew a 1/4 inch seam allowance or a scant 1/4 inch seam allowance all the way along the side seam. I do a little bit of a back stitch at the hump where the band is, and you might have to help it over this little hump a little bit. I also back stitch at the end and at the start of the seam. Now it's time to press. I usually do flat first, and then I kind of open it up so I can press it to one side, and then I turn it wrong side out and press that seam flat. Now it's time to sew a 1/2 inch seam allowance to enclose the first seam. At the beginning, I also like to top stitch the end of the seam to close it off. I also do back stitching at the very beginning of the seam, the end of the seam, and when I get over that little hump where the band is. Here's what the top stitching at the beginning of the seam looked like. That will close off that little opening. Now it's time to turn it right side out and then press it so it lays nice and flat. Once it's pressed, you can trim up the bottom raw edge as necessary to even them up. Now we just repeat what we did with the side seam on the bottom seam. Start with wrong sides together so the right sides will be out, and you're going to sew along that bottom edge a 1/4 inch seam allowance. When you finish the seam, you're going to turn the pillowcase wrong side out and press it flat. Make sure that you poke out the corners so they are nice and crisp. It takes a little bit of work. I had to get my purple thing out and use to poke those out. As I'm pressing, you'll notice on the right side that the side seam is kind of folded over onto the pillowcase. That's how you want it to be. Once it's pressed, you're going to sew your last seam allowance. It's a 1/2 inch seam allowance to enclose that bottom seam. When you're done with the seam, you're going to turn the whole thing right side out and poke those corners out. The one corner that has both of those seams is a little bulkier, but it lays nice and flat once it's pressed. So give the pillowcase a final pressing and you're done.
Now that you've seen my project, let's pick out the project for July. I have got 6 numbers in here, and I took out the ones for the projects that we've already done, so they're going in the bucket, and we're going to pick one out. I hope it's a good one. Had a lot of fun working on last month's project, and this month I'm going to have fun working on project number 9. And for me, that means I'm going to be working on, oh goodness, this is going to be a little trickier one for me. It's in a big bin. That means it's a bigger project. But I have made my blocks for my Farm Girl Vintage quilt, and I have all the blocks done. I just need to put them together. So that'll be my project for July. July 4th marks our 2-year anniversary of putting videos out on our YouTube channel. We want to just thank you for watching. We started out not knowing much about making videos or how to even put them on YouTube, but we have learned a lot in these first 2 years. We hope we can learn more and do even better videos for the future. We want to thank you very much for watching and subscribing. It means a lot to us. We wanted to let you know that we appreciate all your kind comments and we read all of them. We hope you'll keep them coming. I have a notebook full of ideas for videos that we want to try to get done in the next year or two, but we would love to hear what kind of videos you would like to see. So please mention a video you'd like us to make in the comments below and we'll see what we can do. Some of our plans for the next year or two include more Block of the Months. We want to keep those going and are celebrating the States Block of the Month. We're going to do more tutorials, of course, more 2.5 inch strip videos, and another mystery or two, plus, of course, more fabric to unbox. We hope that you will keep watching and subscribing. Thank you very much and happy quilting!